Welcome to the deep dive. If you're like many of us in the Asthma Friend community here in India, you definitely know that managing asthma isn't just about avoiding the usual things. It's also really about navigating the wild card that is our weather, especially this summer and that, unpredictable pre-monsoon time.
Exactly. Yeah, for us living with asthma in this kind of climate, really understanding how these shifting weather patterns themselves act as triggers it's crucial.
Right.
We've been looking at a really interesting post within the Asthma Friend community recently. It sort of blends practical advice, from lived experience with what we know from research. Gives a very comprehensive picture.
And that's exactly what we want to unpack today, right?
Yeah.
Our mission here is to understand the specific ways summer heat and those sudden pre-monsoon changes can kick off asthma symptoms. We'll identify the common things many of us experience, that chest tightness, the wheezing, and really importantly, pull out practical strategies, the ones that come directly from, the shared wisdom and advice within our own Asthma Friend community.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe to start us off, it feels almost like a given that weather affects asthma, but maybe we can dig into why it's such a significant factor.
Well, it's fascinating how incredibly responsive our airways can be.
Mm.
You can think of our lungs as being like finely tuned instruments,
Okay.
and they react quite strongly to changes in the environment. So shifts in temperature, humidity, even subtle variations in air pressure can set off a whole chain reaction,
Leading to.
leading to airway narrowing, increased inflammation, and also heightened allergic responses. And unfortunately, these conditions can also make us a bit more vulnerable to respiratory infections.
Which is the last thing you need with asthma. And then, okay, we have the full force of an Indian summer. It's not just hot, it's often that really intense dry heat in many parts of the country. How does that specific kind of heat play into things?
Yeah, when we look at the specifics of an Indian summer, a few things really stand out. The extreme heat itself, it can lead to dehydration, and that dryness can really irritate and inflame the delicate lining of our airways.
Makes sense.
Also, especially in our cities, our urban centers, we see a significant rise in ground-level ozone. That's from traffic, industrial emissions.
The smog.
Precisely. And, studies, I think in Delhi, for instance,
Mhm.
they've shown a pretty clear link between days with high ozone levels past a certain threshold and a noticeable increase in asthma-related emergency room visits.
Yep.
Plus, you add in the dry air thick with dust and pollen, both, notorious asthma triggers that many of us in the community are all too familiar with.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not just when we step outside either, is it? I remember seeing discussions within the Asthma Friend group about like indoor air quality during summer too.
Oh, absolutely. Indoors, while we might think we're escaping it all, things like fans, they're essential for staying cool, really.
Of course.
But they can also stir up and circulate dust and other indoor allergens, and closed rooms can trap these irritants. Even our air conditioning filters, if we're not, diligent about cleaning them, can become breeding grounds for mold and bacteria.
Ugh, yeah. All of which can lead to those familiar, unwelcome asthma symptoms. What are the main ones that tend to get worse during the summer months, based on what we hear in the Asthma Friend community?
Well, based on what many people share and what the research backs up, we often see an increase in that tight feeling in the chest, that whistling sound when we breathe, the wheezing, shortness of breath that can make even simple things feel difficult, and those persistent coughing fits, especially after we've been out in the heat or the dust.
Okay, so summer is one challenge, and then we start looking forward to the monsoon, maybe some relief. But that pre-monsoon period, that can be a real mixed bag for asthma, can't it?
That's a really good way to put it, yeah. A mixed bag. It promises relief, but it definitely brings its own set of triggers.
So why is that transition, that pre-monsoon time, why is it so tricky?
It's really all about the sudden shifts. We can go from that intense dry heat to, bam, a sudden downpour, and with that comes a really rapid spike in humidity.
Ah, the humidity.
Yes, and this increased moisture in the air can actually cause our airways to constrict. That's what we call bronchoconstriction, basically, a tightening of the muscles around the airways.
And I remember seeing some chats in the Asthma Friend group about thunderstorms being particularly risky. Is that a thing?
Oh, yes, very much so. It's a well-documented phenomenon actually called thunderstorm asthma.
Really?
Yeah, what happens is thunderstorms, with their strong winds and electrical activity, can stir up huge amounts of pollen and mold spores. But interestingly, the atmospheric conditions, the pressure changes, they can actually rupture these pollen grains into much smaller fragments.
Oh, wow.
And these tiny particles are much more easily inhaled deep into the lungs, and they can trigger quite severe asthma attacks in people who are susceptible.
That makes sense. And then just the general increased dampness. That's always a concern in our climate, isn't it? Especially thinking about mold.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That increased humidity, particularly if your home isn't super well ventilated, creates the perfect breeding ground for indoor mold. And as many of us with asthma know all too well, mold is a significant allergen. It can really worsen symptoms.
I've definitely seen some maybe surprising things mentioned in the Asthma Friend group about unexpected triggers during this pre-monsoon time. What stood out to you?
Yeah, it's often the less obvious things that can, catch us off guard. For instance, those early, sometimes scattered pre-monsoon showers. They can lead to mold and mildew growth in places you might not expect.
Like where?
Well, also something many of us might do leaving wet clothes to dry indoors because it's humid outside. That can dramatically increase the dampness inside, further promoting mold.
Ah,
We also need to be mindful of fungal growth, maybe in corners, wardrobes, even behind furniture sometimes.
mm.
And honestly, sometimes it's just the overall high indoor humidity itself. Even if you don't see visible mold, that can be enough of a trigger for some people.
So, okay, thinking practically, what advice has been shared within the Asthma Friend community for managing these specific pre-monsoon challenges?
Some really helpful practical tips have come up from shared experiences. Using dehumidifiers or even just exhaust fans, especially in bathrooms and bedrooms, can make a big difference in controlling that indoor humidity.
Okay.
Prioritizing drying clothes outdoors in the sun if possible, or at least in really well-ventilated spaces, that's key.
Right.
Regularly inspecting our homes, checking walls, carpets, furniture for any signs of mold, that's crucial. And a simple tip, but easy to overlook.
Mm.
Making sure our asthma medications, inhalers, spacers, are kept somewhere dry and clean. Dampness isn't good for them either.
Good point. Now, thinking about the whole transition, navigating from that intense summer heat right into the monsoon proper, it sounds like those sudden shifts, those swings in weather, can be particularly tough on asthma control.
Absolutely. Those rapid weather swings, the days start scorching hot, then suddenly ends with a big temperature drop or a heavy downpour.
Yeah.
They can be very disruptive. Our bodies, and especially our sensitive airways, have to work much harder to adjust to those quick changes.
And getting caught in those unexpected rains, it's more than just, well, getting wet, isn't it?
Precisely. Yeah, unplanned exposure to rain, especially if you get chilled afterwards, can often lead to a cold or a cough. And as many of us in the Asthma Friend community know from firsthand experience, any respiratory infection can be a major trigger for asthma symptoms, a real setback.
Yeah. And even those very first showers, the ones that might seem like such a welcome relief after the heat, I've seen discussions saying they can have a downside too.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? Those first few showers often mix with all the accumulated dust, pollen, and pollutants that have just been sitting there in the dry air for months.
Ah.
So it creates this kind of airborne cocktail of irritants that can be particularly harsh on our airways right at the beginning.
Okay, so let's get really specific then. What are some concrete actions that we, as members of the Asthma Friend community, can take to protect ourselves during both the summer heat and those unpredictable pre-monsoon showers, starting with summer?
Okay, for summer, the advice shared within the community is really practical. Staying indoors during the hottest part of the day, generally say 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., that's a big one.
Makes sense.
When we do have to go out, wearing a good quality mask can actually help filter out a surprising amount of dust and pollutants.
Okay.
Staying well hydrated is vital. Drinking plenty of water, aim for maybe 8 to 10 glasses a day.
Right. Hydration.
And regularly cleaning our fans, air coolers,
Hmm.
and especially the filters in our AC units. That's essential maintenance. Oh, and something that might not immediately come to mind, being mindful of street food.
Street food, how does that connect?
Well, sometimes it can lead to acid reflux for some people, and surprisingly, acid reflux itself can be an asthma trigger for certain individuals, so just something to be aware of.
Interesting connection. Okay, so what about when those pre-monsoon showers start rolling in? What should we be doing then?
Right, for the pre-monsoon period,
Hmm.
using waterproof covers on mattresses and pillows can be a good shield against dampness and potential mold.
Good idea.
Actively trying to avoid damp or poorly ventilated areas within our homes is key.
Hmm.
Many in the community find it really helpful to track the Daily Air Quality Index, the AQI.
Yeah, those apps are useful.
Exactly. They give you a measure of pollutants in the air, and also checking pollen forecasts so you can kind of anticipate potential trigger days.
Be prepared.
Yes. And of course, always, always keeping our emergency inhalers or nebulizers easily accessible. It's just non-negotiable. And, if moles is a persistent recurring issue in your home, maybe exploring professional home cleaning services that specifically target mold removal could be a worthwhile thought.
That makes sense for persistent problems. Now, beyond just reacting to the weather day to day, the Asthma Friend community also shares a lot about helpful lifestyle practices for managing asthma in general, right? These seem really valuable.
Oh, absolutely. And these are such great insights because they come straight from lived experience, from people figuring out what works for them.
Like what?
Well, practices like gel neti, using a neti pot for nasal cleansing, that can be really beneficial, especially for those of us who also deal with allergic rhinitis.
Mm.
Steam inhalation is simple,
Mm.
but often very effective for helping to clear nasal passages and just ease that congested feeling.
Yeah, basic but good.
Breathing exercises like pranayama, which focuses on controlled breathing techniques,
Yeah.
can help strengthen our lung capacity over time. That's more of a long-term thing.
Mm.
And while sometimes people suggest indoor plants like peace lilies or snake plants for air quality,
Oh, yeah, I've heard that.
yeah, but it's important to follow the community's caution there. Keep a really close eye on them for any signs of mold growth, especially when it gets humid. They can sometimes contribute to the problem if you're not careful.
Right. Monitor the soil. Good point. The recent Asthma Friend post you mentioned, it included a my personal experience section. I always find those so relatable. Just hearing how others in the community navigate these challenges is incredibly helpful. What were some key takeaways from that personal story?
Yeah, that personal account really, it just brought home the points we've been discussing. The individual talked about how during those peak heat hours, even on days when the air quality readings weren't like terrible,
Right.
the air still felt heavy and it made breathing feel difficult. They found that actually adjusting their schedule, avoiding being outdoors during the hottest times, made a noticeable difference for them.
Smart.
They also really emphasized how those sudden weather shifts during the pre-monsoon, a hot, sticky morning, then bam, an unexpected evening shower often trigger their asthma. It led to that familiar chest tightness, even that feeling like a cold was about to start.
Yeah, that pre-cold feeling.
Exactly. And their go-to strategies really echoed the practical tips we discussed. Staying indoors when the weather felt extreme, and always keeping the rescue inhaler within easy reach. Just basic preparedness.
It really does bring it home, like you said, when we hear those personal stories, doesn't it? It just reinforces that we're all kind of navigating similar challenges.
Mm-hmm.
The final thoughts in that Asthma Friend post really stuck with me, too. Tune into the weather. Tune into your body. It sounds simple, but it's actually a really powerful reminder, I think.
It really
Yeah.
is. Yeah, living here in India, being mindful of these pretty dramatic weather shifts is just part of life, isn't it?
Hmm.
And each season truly presents its own set of considerations for those of us managing asthma.
Absolutely.
The real power, I think, lies in staying informed about the weather patterns, being proactive in understanding and managing our own individual triggers because they can be different for everyone,
True.
and knowing that we're part of a supportive network like the Asthma Friend community where we can share experiences and learn from each other. That support is huge.
It really is. Okay, so to sort of summarize our deep dive today, we've explored how both the intense summer heat and the unpredictable pre-monsoon weather here in India act as significant and quite distinct asthma triggers.
Yeah.
These triggers often relate to changes in temperature, humidity, air quality, and of course the presence of various allergens like dust, pollen, and mold. We've discussed a whole range of proactive strategies, highlighted the crucial importance of being aware of our own personal asthma triggers, and really emphasized the value and support we find within our Asthma Friend community.
And that brings us to a really important point for you, our listener, as a vital part of this Asthma Friend community. Maybe take a moment to reflect. Think about your own asthma triggers related to these specific weather changes.
Mm-hmm.
What patterns have you noticed in your own experience during summer, during that pre-monsoon shift? And maybe based on what we've explored together in this deep dive, what small, maybe, but significant adjustments could you make to breathe just a little easier, feel a bit more in control during these challenging seasons, just like the experiences shared within our Asthma Friend community?